Alright, today what we're going to end up doing is making a fuse box. A lot of you guys have talked in the comments about me doing one of these, and I think it's finally time that I do one. So what we got going on here is pretty much a mess of wiring things that I don't even know what to do with, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of play this out on what we're going to do. So this is basically where all of our main power will come in from the battery right here, and the power from there will be dispersed out to a bunch of relays, which you can see I have here. And they come with plugs already. I'll leave all the links to all the stuff that I got for this, and it was actually, the Fab Formers made this video, I don't know how long ago, on how to build this, so I'm going to pretty much be doing the exact same thing that he's doing. I really liked how he did it, and it'll work pretty well for what I'm doing, so I'm going to go ahead and make it the way that he did, and then I'm going to actually show you guys how I'm putting it in my truck. So I'll leave a link to his video and all the part links down below, so you guys can check that out, and then I'll pretty much explain kind of what's going on. So first I'm going to go ahead and kind of show you where in the truck this whole thing's going to go. I'm going to kind of explain why I'm using one of these. So inside the truck you can see here's my fuel pump, and it's ran into the cab off the battery with like a fuse, and I just don't really like that. So, and then the same goes for my terrible Halo wire job that's going right there. This is all just temporary stuff, like I've said multiple times. But you can see the stock fuse box is up here, and we're probably going to end up relocating that and making some room, and we're probably going to put our entire fuse box right around here, and I'll end up probably mounting this one next to it. If I really wanted to, I could route that in, to just delete all these fuses and route them into the fuse relay box, but I just don't want to get complicated with wiring because I'm not very good with wiring. So I'm going to go ahead and relocate that fuse box probably below it or next to it, and we're probably going to put our fuse box generally in this area under the dash. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this fuse box out and go ahead and just let it hang, rip some of that leftover insulation out, and then we'll go ahead and kind of take some measurements and mock up kind of where our new fuse box is gonna sit, and I'll go ahead and cut out that piece of plastic and we can kind of start laying things out. All right, so I got a piece cut out. This is I think 5 inches by 7 inches. And then I relocated my original fuse box. You can see there's one of the holes. It was all like crooked and whatever, so I just moved it over and drilled 2 new holes and put the screws back in. This is kind of like the blank space that I got going up here. And there was a couple, like, you can see those 2 holes where light is coming in. There was 2 like little plugs there, took those out. This will kind of cover it, and then you can see it'll mount pretty much right here, and you can see down here, it gives me a decent spot to do it with. So I think this will work. This is the sizing I'm gonna use, and I'm gonna go ahead and take this now and kind of mock up where everything's gonna go on this panel. All right, so here's our piece, and then this is where our main battery wire goes in right here. You can put a fuse in and these guys are all fuse slots, and then they'll go out to the relays. So this guy I'll most likely have kind of in this orientation. I gotta figure out how I want to do this. All right, so this is pretty much what I got. I measured it wrong. 5 inches by 9 inches, that fits. So this will pretty much fit everything. So this is kind of how I have it laid out, because then I can take these guys and I can plug them in, and once they're all plugged in I can route the wires where they need to go accordingly, and it'll give me just enough room to wrap it all, make it all look good. And then I have a piece of just really thick rubber because I might need to space it up, because once I mount these, I think the end of these screws will be poking through the bottom, and it's mounted on a flat surface, so I gotta make sure that the ends of these don't drill into the body. So I'm gonna make sure I'll kind of sort it out. So I'm gonna go ahead and mount these, kind of put them in the plate, and I'll put all the screws in and kind of hard mount everything. And then I'm gonna see how close or how high I need to kind of lift this up to make sure it's not actually resting on the firewall. Alright, so you can see I got everything mounted, but you can see it kind of sticks out on the back side, so I am going to have to lift that up a little bit, but you can see everything's mounted. Good, not perfect. I'm missing a bolt, or a screw. I got to go get another one, but everything's wired up here. So what I'm going to do now is I have these plugs, and I'm going to pretty much wire it up so where power comes in on our main battery here, goes to a fuse, you take a lead out, and then you have power into the relay, and then you would pretty much plug it in, and then that would go to your switch. So you're not drawing all the power from a switch. You pull the power from the relay. A lot of switches can't handle a lot of high amperage draw. The relays can, so you want to pull the power off the relay instead of using the switch itself. So I'm going to use this as kind of my safety to kind of be able to run my fuel pump, those ambers that I have, a couple of few things. So those are the two things. The two things I'm going to be wiring are the halos for the ambers, and then my fuel pump on another one. So I'm pretty much going to kind of wire this up, and I'll kind of explain how it kind of works. So I've got it all pretty much wired, so I'm going to try to explain this the best I can. I'm learning this as I go. So basically imagine that this, our power block, is where our battery comes in right here. We have that little breaker in between the two just in case any wire shorts out. We'll probably have like a big 10, anywhere from 10 to 16 gauge wire coming into here from the battery, and then these will kind of disperse into the relay, which you can kind of see I have them run all along the bottom, and then I ran those first. Those will go into each relay, and then from there it'll run to the accessories, and then you can see this white wire for me, which is the one on the left, is the ground, as you can see right there, and the battery one's on the bottom, goes to the battery, and then you have our two accessories left over, which go here. So you pretty much have, one of them would go to the actual object. Let's say I'm wiring a fuel pump, and one of them would go to the actual fuel pump itself, and the other one would go to the switch, because you don't want all the power going to the switch. You want it coming off of this relay. This relay, which I have one right here, is a 40 amp relay, which allows me to pull 40 amps out of this guy without blowing anything up. Alright guys, so I'm just coming in. I changed cameras, so hopefully the audio or picture isn't terrible. So basically I want to explain kind of how a relay is. I have one right here, which I'll show you in a second. But this is a basic diagram. You have 87, 85, 86, and 30. And then I'll go back to the actual relay box and kind of show you how it's wired up. But this is a general consensus of pretty much what you're looking at. You have our main power in, which on mine you'll see the fuse box goes to this and powers the relay. And then you have a common ground, which I'll show you a common ground coming off of it. And then you pretty much have power in and power out. Now the 12 volt switch over here, which is pretty much kind of come from the switch in the cab, this is why we went with a positive to positive. You're going to want to find a 12 volt source in the cab and run that switch to give power to the relay, and then that will go out to, say, your lights or your fuel pump or whatever for that matter. It's not necessarily always going to be like a regular switch. It has power coming in down here, but a relay is a switch. It'll take a 40 amp blow better than a switch would, per se. The actual relay itself does not give off 40 amps of power, or it doesn't have 12 volts. You get the 12 volts from the battery here coming in, and the switch that has a 12 volt current coming off of it, because you're finding a 12 volt in the cab, that current will go through the switch to the relay, and this tells the relay to turn on, and that will then send power out to your spotlights or your fuel pump or whatever you're running on. And I have my relay right here. So I've got my relay right here. As you can see, the numbers are labeled on the inside, 85, 87, 30, and 86, I believe. So that's pretty much corresponding exactly to what we have going on here. So we'll go ahead and we'll take these two and I'll show you guys how they're wired up. I'm going to finish putting that thing together, and then I'll pretty much come back when it's all said and done, and I'll show you guys how I ran it. I'll have sufficient power going to everything because it's nice and dispersed. I could put fuses in here, so if anything does go wrong with any of these relays, it'll blow a fuse or any wires ground out. I have a fuse to save me here, and then in between the actual power block and the battery, I'll have another 100 amp fuse right there. So pretty much if anything went wrong, it would pop that, and then you go ahead and reset it. So that's kind of how that guy works. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. I'm trying to explain it as best I can. Relays are kind of confusing until you kind of dive into it, and then you kind of, once you actually have it wired up and you realize and visually see where everything goes, it kind of slowly makes a little bit more sense. But this would be pretty good for right now. So now my only real problem is being able to space this up, because you can see I have all these screws kind of just like hanging out. I'm trying to mount it on the firewall. So I had this piece of rubber here, but this is probably not thick enough, so I'm gonna have to get something that's a little bit thicker. I want just a big block of rubber that I can probably put maybe one on the top, one in the middle, middle and then one on the bottom going across it, and then I can just take self-tappers on each corner and go ahead and mount this thing in the firewall. So I'm gonna go ahead and figure out what I want to get for that block spacer. I'm gonna come back when I can actually figure out how to mount this in the firewall, and we'll go ahead and wire this thing up correctly and see how it does. All right, so I don't know where the video ended before, but I went ahead and went to the hardware store, kind of took a break because I was kind of brainstorming how I'm actually gonna mount this. Pretty sure I have it mostly right, and although in terms of actually how the system's wired, from the switch to the fuel pump to wherever to here, I kind of gotta experiment with that a little bit to see how this piece works, but I'm pretty sure I got it generally. So I went ahead and went down to the hardware store and I grabbed a bunch of these self-tappers because I honestly am not really sure how I want to mount this. This isn't a firewall, which sucks, so you're gonna see whatever it's mounted to come through the firewall, which is kind of unfortunate. So what I ended up doing, what I think I'm going to do, is since you can see that I have all these screws kind of sticking out the back, it's obviously not going to lay flat on the firewall, so I need to space it up somehow. You can do that by either taking you can cut out a larger piece and have that. You can heat it up and bend it and try to get it to raise itself up. But I didn't do that because I wasn't thinking of it. So what I ended up doing is going down and getting some, these are just threaded nylon spacers, but I got them a larger size. So I'm able to go ahead and put these screws in them. So basically what will happen is this will go ahead and space it up, and I have enough meat on here to where I can still drill into the firewall and mount it correctly. And the kind of screw I got, I don't know the actual name of this, but it's a self-tapper with basically like a little bushing on the top, which makes it so it won't crack the surface and really destroy the surface. It'll look clean, and it won't really put much pressure on it, and it'll allow it to sit flush and not be all wavy and warped. So this will basically kind of come through the back like that, and then I just dropped it. It'll basically come through the back with a spacer, and then the rest of it will be drilled into the firewall like so. So it should work pretty well. And then obviously I'm gonna have this really ugly kind of self-tapper sticking through the firewall, which I don't like, but I'm gonna go ahead and fix that. I'll show you guys how I do that. I believe I'm probably gonna use a shrink tubing, put a tiny piece of shrink tubing over it, heat it up the ends, and then it'll close off the end, so it'll be black on a black firewall, so you're not just gonna see these self-tappers sticking out the end. So hopefully it looks good. I'm just, as I'm saying 100 times, I'm still learning this as I'm doing it, so hopefully I do all this right. I'm just kind of sharing it with you so you can kind of take my ideas for what it's worth. You can maybe do this in your own truck if you want. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to get this installed, and then I'll probably come back and I will kind of discuss what I did and how I did it and why I did it. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to get this thing mounted in the truck real quick, so we'll see. All right, so this is pretty much the predicament I'm in right now. As you guys saw, I was trying to put it underneath the dash, but there's just so much going on under there, and then I realized that if you put it where it was gonna go, that the clutch pedal gets right next to this strip right here, which normally it's like, okay, cool, it clears, but you gotta realize there's wires coming off of this, and I don't wanna ground anything out, and I don't wanna stuff this thing next to a bunch of other wires and pieces of metal and risk grounding it out, lighting my whole truck on fire. So until I actually rewire the entire truck and redo everything and actually be able to conceal this under the dash and make a nice spot for it, I kind of need to find somewhere to put it temporarily. And my one option that seemed mostly reasonable was sliding it right in this slot and moving everything else, and it fits perfectly. It is the exact height and everything that will go right there. Obviously I would need to move all of this other stuff to get it to fit, but I just feel like this is the most reasonable spot. It's close to the battery. I can easily find a ground for the ground coming off, wire everything into a harness. My battery lead can go straight to the fuse box. It makes things really simple up here. The only downside is I am in the engine bay, so I have to deal with a multitude of things. Like heat is one important thing, and water is the other one, which is very sketchy, especially considering everything is open. So most likely, I am in winter right now. I know you probably can't tell. This is in the middle of winter, middle of November right now. Once the rain starts to come, I'm definitely gonna need to get some sort of cover or make some sort of cover for this thing so water stays out of it. I also wanna keep my engine temps in check, considering it does stay relatively cool. This is a cool running motor. It runs about 175 all the time, and then when it's colder out, it'll stay towards the 165 range, but I gotta make sure that everything in here is safe and not gonna explode, so I'll eventually mount this temporarily, hook everything up, test it out, make sure it works, and then I'll come around and design a box. I'll most likely make some sort of glass box so you can see it and try to make it concealed to where it's weather tight and stuff like that, but that's going to be its own project on itself. So keep in mind that I do know that, and I need to make sure it's safe. So I am going to try to mount this here, which is going to be kind of a pain because as you can tell, I got a mess going on here. So basically this whole process requires rewiring all of this kind of stuff. Not necessarily rewiring, but relocating everything, and definitely redoing the harness. So it's going to be a little bit of time, and I'm going to kind of experiment with this a little bit. I've never done this before, as I said multiple times in this video already, so I'm just going to kind of experiment and see what works and what doesn't. This is the
relay for the horn that goes here. If you didn't already know that, this goes out to your horn and that's just the relay for it. I've got fusible links coming off the starting solenoid. I've got a bunch of stuff I got to figure out. So I'm going to try to relocate some of this stuff and come back when I got it sort of figured out. I don't know. It's going to take me a little while. So, all right. So since we're doing a lot on wiring, I think this is the perfect time to go ahead and make a little intro to something I am incredibly excited about, and that would be this box right here. As you can probably tell, it does have Optima Power batteries on it. I am incredibly excited to announce that I've partnered up with Optima Batteries. They were kind enough to send me out 2 red tops for my projects, which is incredible. For anyone who knows me personally, I'm building my truck and I bought my truck in the intentions of autocrossing the truck. That's what the whole goal of the entire truck was. That was for the Crown Vic chassis and everything. This has not been just like a couple months ago I decided to build it this way. I've been kind of looking into doing this whole thing for the last like 5 years of my life, and I really liked the Optima Pro Touring and Autocross series that they're doing. That's a really big thing I wanted to get into, and the fact that Optima was nice enough to reach out to me and send me these batteries is unreal to me. I cannot thank Optima Batteries enough. So they actually sent me a red top, brand new, which is really cool. And I can't even like describe my excitement right now. I mean, I don't think you can really get much better than that. I am just beyond thankful for Optima for reaching out to me and giving me the opportunity to actually run their stuff in my truck. That's crazy, you know? This is the battery we're going to be using after this whole wiring situation's kind of done. It's kind of elapsed into a lot larger project than I anticipated, so this video is probably going to be pretty lengthy, so I'm sorry about that, but I'm going to try to make it as detailed and entertaining as I can for you. So we're going to go ahead and cut right to it and get this battery and a lot of things into the truck, and I'll catch up with you guys when we kind of got a decent setup figured out in the engine bay of my truck. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing in. So I'm trucking along here. As you can see, I've got a battery mount in. I went ahead and cut the stock one, as you can tell right there. It's pretty much cut off flush. And then I have my relay box here, and you can kind of see back there the factory mount hole for the battery trays right there. I'm covering that, and the reason I'm not moving it up is because I realize when the hood closes, this hinge comes down and it'll smash this thing. So the tightest I can make everything and still have it work is have the starting solenoid here, and then I'm probably not going to use these terminals anyway, so it shouldn't be a big deal. I'm only going to be using these, as you can tell. So it should be okay there. I have to mount this here, and because this is here, it covers the stock battery mount. And not only that, this battery is a red top Optima, which is much smaller than a regular battery. So I went ahead and cut the end of the battery mount off, and I'm gonna have to kind of remake it. So I'll probably end up welding a flat face here and then making a little bolt mount right here, so I can go ahead and drill a hole. I'm gonna mount the rest of the battery tray here instead of up here. I might just use the end of it and cut a section out and scoot it in and see if I can get that to work. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I want you guys to keep in mind, a lot of people probably don't have this battery. This is a pretty expensive battery, and it's a lot smaller than a regular battery. The battery I have that was in here or fit in the tray perfectly. That's a big battery. So this would most likely have to lay flat on the fender well. You wouldn't be able to put it here. And then you got to also keep in mind where the starting solenoid is. And the big thing is you got to make sure your hood hinge doesn't close and hit it, because that's the first thing I had happen. As I looked at it and I was like, wait a minute, because it was up here and I started closing the hood and I looked at it and I was like, oh, yep, that's not going to work. So keep in mind when you're kind of laying the stuff out, and if need be, you can always move the battery over there, do something over there instead. I mean, you don't always have to keep it right here. So do whatever you think works best for you. So I'm just kind of laying this stuff out. So I'm going to come back when it's pretty close. Alright, so I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an update on what's going on. This is everything kind of in. I'll explain the harness later. For right now, I want to kind of explain where I'm getting my power source from. So in a retrospect, I'm getting power from the battery to here. Fuses go in here, and you run power to your relay, and your relay will disperse power to your switch, and on your switch it's not like you're gonna have a ground and then a hot side on your switch or anything like that. You have both sides of your switch are technically hot. You have your hot side of your relay because you want power to turn the relay on, obviously. So you have power from your battery powering this, but it's not going to turn on until the switch tells it to. So inside the cab, you need to find a hot source to run that switch off of to give this power. If this has power on one end, end to turn it on, you need power coming from another end to turn it on. So I need to find a 12-volt source inside the cab. There's multiple ones you can do. Since I am running 2 items, I'm running a fuel pump and I'm running halo headlights that I have, and I wanted to run the halos off of a permanent 12-volt, which I'll show you which one I picked, and then the fuel pump I want on the key, because if you, for safety reasons, you want the key to have to be on for the fuel pump to work, and you also want to make sure that on certain things your fuse block has an accessory that you can run power off of, but the key has to be on. So the one in the fuse blocks, which I'll show you, that's the one we're going to get our power for the fuel pump for, and I'm going to go show you which one I'm going to pick for the halos. All right, so for our halos, this actually we've already tested and has 12 volts of voltage going through it. So this is actually our courtesy light. It sits right here, and I took it out because I work on my truck so much. I'm tired of the dome light always being on. If I really want it on, I'll turn that and turn the dome light on. I don't really care for this. So this has 12 volts through it. You can actually reach up and pull the harness up behind the dash and pull it out, and this is our hot side right here, and you can tell it's our hot side because you have 2 wires going to it, so that gives us power right there. And if you're curious, you can just put a ground somewhere with a voltmeter and then just put the positive lead on one of these 2 and figure out which one has 12 volts. I took this out, one of the wires just coincidentally ripped off, and so what I'll do is I'll cut this and I'll put a plug, and the plug will go to the one side of the switch. That's our 12 volt into the switch, and then we'd run a wire from the switch to the relay box, and the relay would then take power to the pump or fans or whatever you're running. So I'm gonna go ahead and hook everything up, and hopefully I can explain it again a little bit better, and once it's all said and done, I'll go over the whole thing again just to kind of show you guys and make a little bit more sense of it. I know this is extremely confusing, so I'm trying to make it as clear as I can. Switched up cameras again once more, just so I can make sure that I get this. So as you can see, everything is done now. It looks absolutely incredible. I can't even describe how good this whole thing came out. So as you can see, the whole box is all wired in the bottom like we did earlier, and it's all dispersed. You can see I've got some fuses in there, and I'll explain what all those are ran to, but everything is tucked. You can see my nice nylon loom going all the way up, and then it's going all the way across, as you can see, all the way across. One's going down into the fuel pump, and the other one is just ran in the cab. Ignore that little red wire, I think that's for my coil right here. But you can see there's no janky wiring going on over here. This is just the factory stuff we had before, and there's none, literally none. Even all the way down in there, you can see all the way down in there we've got a wire loom. So you can see we've got all of our fuses kind of lined up. Sorry, this camera does make some focusing noises. This is not the camera I always film with. The only thing that is bad about this entire setup is I do not have a cover right there. As you can see, you can see the wires. Now you can't, so I need to make some sort of cover to go over this piece right here. Is the only thing I need. But so you can see I pretty much ran the nylon spacers in between the 2, and then just kind of spaced it out so none of these self-tappers hit the actual fender well. I have my main battery cable. I got this guy at O'Reilly's. It has one accessory lead coming off of it, which I just spliced to a 10 gauge wire running out and around to the bottom of this fuse panel right here. As you can see, it come in right there. That powers all of these, and then as you can see, I put 2 fuses, one for my halos and the other one for the fuel pump. Ran those, and they power the fuses like we discussed earlier on how the relays are actually routed. It's gonna be, you really probably can't tell just by this kind of cluster of how it is, but basically you have your power in coming in one of them, which for me, if you route them like this, it will pretty much be that red wire, which is our red one, which is on the very bottom, which would be our 30, and then our ground is the one on our left, which would be on this one, our 86. Our 87, I believe, is our power out, and our 85, which is the one on the right here, that one goes to our switch. So we have our switch coming in on the right here, and it sends power out on the top. For me, it's this black wire, which goes power in from the switch, turns it on, follows the blue wire down, And then that, as you can see, I've shrink wrapped everything. It's super difficult for me to kind of like explain all this because I've spent so much time tucking and shrink tubing everything so you can't really see it. But basically the power goes out into the distribution block, and then I have my fuel pump ran. So as you can see, there are 4 things ran here. You've got 1, 2, and then 1, 2 again. And then you've got, on this side of things, it should be our switch in and then our power out. So this is our switch to our relay, relay to our fuel pump, switch to our relay, relay to our halos. Those are the halo lights. That's pretty much how it all came out. It's super confusing. I'm trying to explain it. I hope I'm at least kind of making somewhat of sense. I'll answer as many comments as I get about this. This is super, super complicated, and that's why this video is going to be closer to the 30-minute mark. And I got the Optima battery in there looking really nice, and what it ended up doing was cutting that battery tray as you guys saw. So everything's loomed. As you can see, I loomed everything, nylon loomed it all the way up to our voltage regulator up in the top here. As you can see, it's ran all the way down and then over to the alternator, comes back up, routed the harness. Everything is tucked behind here, which is nice. And the ground, I put everything into one common ground, which is my white wire. That would be our number 86 on this relay, and it's routed to the back, and it's actually just stuck on the back of this nylon washer. I don't know if I can get the shot. Yeah, you literally can't even see it. It's tucked behind that nylon washer on the bottom, so everything's routed as tight as I could get it back there. I went ahead and I put the horn relay and the starter solenoid flipped upside down, kind of tucked underneath the hood hinge, as you can kind of see there. And then it's pretty much just all tucked wiring. It takes a lot of time. This is, I think, 1.5 inches, or no, it's 1 inch nylon loom. You can get this at Napa. This is a pretty nice heavy-duty nylon loom. The nice thing about this is you can see it's split, so you can open it up. I have, I think, a fuse link sitting in there. There's a couple other small things, and then it's routed up and around all the way across to my switch in the cab. Alright, so now here's the difficult part. I don't know if I showed this, but it's just a piece of angle iron that I use in an existing hole underneath the dash. That is how I mounted this little switch panel here. And then I've just got my switches. One of them is our accessory down on the very, very bottom. It's probably not going to focus very well. I got to manually focus it here. So you can see our red wire is coming off of that accessory in the fuse panel. That is just off of our instrument panel one, and that gives power up to the switch, which this one is our fuel pump. And as you can probably tell, this does absolutely nothing unless the key is turned on, which is nice about this entire setup. If I turn the key on, that is where my fuel pump, that acts as kind of a kill switch because the key does need to be on for that one to work. That is the only downside about wiring anything to the accessory slot in this fuse panel. Now, as I discussed earlier, I ended up using the courtesy light that was sitting in the door jamb and routed that to our halos, which, as you can see, I can turn those off and on. Now, this is everything of the wiring I left out just for demonstration purposes, but this is the harness that came out of the door jamb. I pulled it up and out of the dash. These 2 wires are the positive side, and then this one that I've kind of just got hanging down here, this blue one, this is our ground for that. And I went ahead, and as you can see, I went ahead and shrink tubed it so it didn't ground out on anything. And then our positive lead is pretty much, I took both of those two, put them into one, and then I put it to the positive side of the switch, and then the switch pulls that black wire out into the fuse panel. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. It's basically you've got power in from 2 different sources, one from the accessory, one from that courtesy light. Courtesy light has 12 volt all the time. The fuel pump has only accessory. Then that means that the key has to be on for this guy to work. Then from there, on the other side of the switch, you're running a wire directly to the relay. The relay gets turned on by this switch. Relay sends power out to your fuel pump, your lights, etc. Alright, so hopefully that makes sense. I'm sorry if it sounded like I'm screaming into this mic. This mic is not something I'm used to filming with, but I'm pretty much going to be taking some glamour shots of this. I hope you guys understand what's going on. And then the nice thing about this relay, or this fuse panel right here, is you don't have to run a relay. You can see I've only got 4 relays hooked up to it, but because there is a lead from the ground coming into the bottom powering this entire thing, all you have to do is put a fuse in it and then route a positive lead up, make a ground, which I have sitting right here, plugged into that fuse. That goes to a positive lead, which turns these LEDs on. It does not need a relay to run certain things. So basically I'll have this side of the panel be used for relays, this side for just fuse links. So it's just got a fuse link in it. That's just a 15 amp fuse. That's what powers those my engine bay lights. Just got a ground running off it right there, and then a positively that goes up to a mercury switch, and then positively goes up to my LED. So you can really experiment with this and use it really any way you want. There isn't one particular way to use this, which is really, really nice. So I'm sorry if I filmed really bad with this camera. I'd never use this camera literally, but I needed to get close up and focus and make sure you guys can actually see what I was pointing at, to make sure you guys understand kind of how this works. It's extremely difficult for me to explain something like this because I am also learning it myself. I'm almost 100% positive that I explained dang near everything correctly. I really hope I did, and if not, you can kind of look at everything and kind of see how I did it. I really hope this helps you guys. This was a super big learning process for me. I pretty much saw that relay box made on the Fab forums and thought I need to do that. That looks really cool. Not only that, I need to put a relay in for my fuel pump, and I wanted to do that. So this was kind of the one way I thought to do it. So hopefully you guys can understand that, and I hope you guys got something out of it. A lot of you guys on Instagram and social media were asking me about this relay box and how to make it and where I bought it, and the real answer is that you guys can just go out and make it because it's really not that hard if you really think about it. The only difficult part is actually routing up the wires properly without blowing anything up, which is another reason why you're running fuses in between them just in case anything breaks. You have so many fuses going on that nothing can physically break. That's the whole point of this entire system. You want it to be as safe as you can possibly have. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Like the video if you did enjoy. That would really mean a lot to me. I put a lot of time. This was a video filmed over like a course of a week. A lot of nights and days trying to figure out how this all went. This was not a one-day process for me. This took me about a week to do properly with school and stuff. So I really would appreciate your guys' feedback. Any comments, I will do my best to answer in the fullest of my ability and make sure you guys understand this. This costed definitely below $100 for all the switches, for all the panels, for all the everything, and all the links for all these parts will be down in the description. The original video for how to actually make this thing on the Fab Forums channel, I'll link down below, so if you guys want to check it out on a different perspective, maybe he might explain it a little bit differently, I'll leave that down there too. But yeah, this video is super long, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye guys.